Blessings of the Triple Gem, Teruan Saranai. Welcome to another Sutta Meditation Series Dhamma live stream. Heartfelt good wishes to everyone on this auspicious Vesak day. The theme for today's Dhamma sessions is the Tathagata, which literally translates as the one who has thus gone or the perfected one. And it is an epithet used by the Buddha when referring to himself. And we will use the terms Buddha and Tathagata interchangeably. The main purpose of today's live stream is to understand the perfection of a fully enlightened Buddha, a Samma Sambuddha, and why he is superior to all other living beings, including humans, devas, and even noble disciples who realize the fruit of arahantship. So we'll be examining the Sutta Pitaka to clarify and understand things such as what is a Buddha, how does one become a Buddha, what are some of the unique qualities of a Buddha, what makes a Buddha incomparable to others, what does the Buddha himself have to say about it. And in clarifying some of these things, we hope to arouse more conviction or confidence, faith in the Tathagata, and to take the opportunity to pay homage to the Buddha, cultivate a deep sense of gratitude for the teachings, and also later on ask forgiveness for any wrongdoing, and meditate together on the qualities of the Buddha. So let's begin by paying respects to the Triple Gem. We can bow our heads and join our hands in Anjali. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dhamma, and homage to the Noble Sangha. As we know, Vesak is the most sacred holy day of Theravada Buddhism. Vesak or Visakha Puja commemorates the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and parinibbana. So, final nibbana or full release from samsara of Gautama Buddha. And on each occasion, there were powerful earthquakes that followed, heralding the significant events. So, the future Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he was born in almost 2,600 years ago in Lumbini, now in modern-day Nepal. He was born to royal parents of the Sakyan clan. And after seeing 4 prognostic signs, so an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and a recluse, he renounced the world and household life at around the age of 29 after the birth of his son, and that was to go forth as an ascetic. Over the next 6 years, he spent time with other teachers and mastered their teachings, only to find it did not result in true liberation. He also performed austerities and came to realize it was also not the way leading to true liberation. So he finally attained perfect enlightenment, Nibbana at Bodh Gaya. And an invitation to teach the Dhamma was made by Brahma Sahampati. And after his first teaching that set in motion the wheel of the Dhamma, the Buddha spent the remaining years teaching the Dhamma and setting up the order of the Sangha. Around the age of 80, the Buddha attained final Nibbana or full extinguishment, so Mahaparinibbana, at Kusinara. And just before entering into higher concentrations, the last words of the Buddha were, "The Tathagata knows that there's not even a single bhikkhu in this Sangha who has doubt or uncertainty regarding the Buddha, the teaching, the Sangha, the path, or the practice. Even the last of these 500 bhikkhus is a stream enterer, not liable to be reborn in the underworld, bound for awakening." And then his very last words to the Sangha were, "Come now, bhikkhus, I say to you, conditions fall apart, persist with vigilance." And so we get those words from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta in Digha Nikaya. So let's have a look at what we'll cover during this particular session. So our usual how to get the best out of this session, a few tips and reminders. Then we'll look at what is a Buddha, as well as why is he called a Tathagata. And then we'll go into the process of how does one become a Buddha? So there's the aspirant before becoming a bodhisattva and then having to fulfill the 10 perfections and other things. And then also some commentarial things that will help us to enhance our knowledge and understanding of how a Buddha comes to be. And this is also so that we understand how rare and how difficult it is to become a Buddha. Then we'll look at some of the unique qualities of a Buddha, so the knowledges, powers, and marks of a great man, to name a few. And for this particular session, then we'll close the session with sharing of merit and blessings. So how to get the best out of this session? Keep an open mind, and this is particularly true for today because we may have certain blocks or challenges regarding the Buddha himself and how one comes to be a Buddha. And also be okay with not understanding everything. There might be certain things that don't make sense or certain things that we're not quite ready to hear right now. But the most important thing is to allow the Dhamma to flow into one's mind and see what actually one wants to take at this time. And then remember that we're all learners, so we lean on each other, coming together to make effort to develop the Noble Path. And we're walking this path together. We apply ourselves to the Buddha's words, so really give ourselves the opportunity to connect with those words. And then if there's a meditation, which won't be in this session, but in the next one, we'll have the opportunity to really apply the Buddha's words and instructions. And so in that way, we're following a wisdom pathway so that we see the Dhamma directly and we apply our own examples if that's what is needed at the time. And so we gain direct insight. So when we see the Dhamma, we see the Buddha. And by seeing the Buddha, we see the Dhamma. And lastly, let's have good wishes for everyone on this Vesak Day, to those who are online right now, but also to anyone who has helped us on the spiritual path up to this point. And have good wishes in general, have metta. So let's first look at the simple question of what is a Buddha. We can begin with references from the Patisambhida Magga, which is the path of analytical discrimination. And this is the volume that's attributable to Venerable Sariputta. And in particular, we can specifically refer to the Anapanasati Kata. And it also is the same thing that is said in the Mahanidesa, in fact, in the Sariputta Mahanidesa. So what it says is, to the Buddha, the Blessed One who is self-accomplished, who without a teacher awakened by himself to the truths among things not heard before, who obtained omniscience in regard to them and mastery over the powers. And then it goes on to say, in what sense was he a Buddha? And it answers, he was a Buddha as one who awakened to the truths, as one who awakens this population, as all-knowing, as all-seeing, as not being guided by others, as one who is opened up, as one whose taints are destroyed, as one without defilements, as one utterly devoid of lust, hatred, and delusion, as one utterly without defilements, as one who has gone to the one-way path, as one who awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment. And then it goes on and says, Buddha is not a name given by a mother, a father, brother, sister, friends and companions, family members and other relatives, ascetics and Brahmins or deities. Buddha is a name pertaining to the end of emancipation, a designation accruing to the Buddhas, the Blessed Ones, along with realization with the obtaining of omniscient knowledge at the foot of the Bodhi tree. So in his interaction with Brahmadona, and this is in the Dona Sutta in Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 4, discourse number 36, the Buddha clarifies a few things when he's asked about what he is. And so the Brahmadona then saw the thousand-spoked wheels of the Blessed One's footprints with their rims and hubs complete in all respects, and thought, "It is astounding and amazing. These surely could not be the footprints of a human being." Then the Blessed One left the highway and sat down at the foot of a tree, folding his legs crosswise, straightening his body, and establishing mindfulness in front of him. Tracking the Blessed One's footprints, the Brahman donor saw the Blessed One sitting at the foot of the tree, graceful, inspiring confidence, with peaceful faculties and peaceful mind. One who had attained to the highest taming and serenity, like a tamed and guarded bull elephant with controlled faculties. So then he approached the Blessed One and said to him, "Could you be a Deva, sir?" And then the Buddha responded, "I will not be a Deva, Brahmin." Then he asked, "Could you be a Gandharva, sir?" And the Buddha goes, "I will not be a Gandharva, Brahmin." And then he asked again, "Could you be a Yaka, sir?" And the Buddha says, "I will not be a Yaka, Brahmin." And then he asks, "Could you be a human being, sir?" And the Buddha replies, "I will not be a human being, Brahmin." And then the Brahmin donor repeats the Buddha's answers, so the same things, and asks, "What then could you be, sir?" And the Buddha answers, "Brahmin, I have abandoned those taints, because of which I might have become a Deva. I have cut them off at a root, made them like a palm stump, obliterated them so that they are no longer subject to future arising." And he says the same thing for a Gandharva, a Yaka, and also a human being, that he has cut them off at the root, made them like palm stumps, obliterated them so that they are no longer subject to future arising. Then he says this, "Just as a blue, red, or white lotus flower, though born in the water and grown up in the water, rises above the water and stands unsoiled by the water, even so, though born in the world and grown up in the world, I have overcome the world and dwells unsoiled by the world. Remember me, Brahman, as a Buddha." So isn't that lovely? So as we said earlier, a Tathagata literally translates as the one who is thus gone, or the perfected one, and it's an epithet used by the Buddha when referring to himself, rather than referring to himself as me, myself, or I. So we see an example of this in the Loka Sutta. This is Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 4, discourse number 23. And he says, because the Tathagata has fully awakened to the world, the Tathagata is detached from the world, the Tathagata has fully awakened to the origin of the world, the Tathagata has abandoned the origin of the world, and the Tathagata has fully awakened to the cessation of the world. The Tathagata has realized the cessation of the world. The Tathagata has fully awakened to the way leading to the cessation of the world. The Tathagata has developed the way leading to the cessation of the world. Now, the way that he uses Tathagata may also be indicative, although it doesn't say this in the suttas, but it could be indicative that the Buddha has completely abandoned taking anything as me and mine, having uprooted the taints. So that's why he would refer to himself as Tathagata. So again, the Buddha goes on to explain in his own words why he is called a Tathagata. So he says, "Bhikkhus, in this world with its Devas, Mara, and Brahma, among this population with its ascetics and Brahmins, its Devas and humans, whatever is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, reached, sought after, examined by the mind, all that the Tathagata has fully awakened to. Therefore he is called the Tathagata." And then secondly he says, "Bhikkhus, whatever the Tathagata speaks, utters, or expounds in the interval between the night when he awakens to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment and the night when he attains final Nibbana, all that is just so and not otherwise, and therefore he is called the Tathagata." And then the third thing the Buddha says is, "Bhikkhus, as the Tathagata speaks, so he does. As he does, so he speaks. Since he does as he speaks and he speaks as he does, therefore he's called the Tathagata." And then the last one is bhikkhus. In the world with its devas, Mara, and Brahma, among this population with its ascetics and Brahmins, its devas and humans, the Tathagata is the vanquisher, the unvanquished, the universal seer, the wielder of mastery. Therefore, he's called the Tathagata. So those are some very, very good reasons there. And we'll refer to some of those things a little bit later on as well. Now, the next thing that the Buddha says comes in the Tathagata Sutta, and this is in Samyutta Nikaya, and he says, bhikkhus, whatever beings there are, whether those without feet, or those with 2 feet, or those with 4 feet, or those with many feet, whether consisting of form or formless, whether percipient, non-percipient, or neither percipient nor non-percipient, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, is declared to be the chief among them. So too, whatever wholesome states there are, they are all rooted in vigilance, converge upon vigilance, and vigilance is declared to be the chief among them. So when a bhikkhu is vigilant, it is expected that he will develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path. So in this session, we're going to investigate and delve deeper into what the Buddha's statement that he's declared to be the chief among all beings, or whatever beings there are, we're going to delve into that and investigate that and come to a better understanding so that we can arouse more saddha. So there are 2 types of Buddhas referred to in the Sutta Pitaka. The first is a perfectly enlightened Buddha, so a Samma Sambuddha, and also a solitary or silent Buddha, in Pali Pacceka Buddha. So a perfectly enlightened Buddha, Sammasambuddha, is defined in Sammasambuddha Sutta, so Samyutta Nikaya chapter 22, discourse number 58. The Buddha says, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, liberated by non-clinging through revulsion towards form, through its fading away and cessation, is called a perfectly enlightened one. And we also know that the enlightenment of a Buddha is called Sammasambodhi, so perfect enlightenment. And we also know that when a lay follower has saddha, this conviction towards the Buddha, it means that we believe in the enlightenment of the perfect one. So in Pali, this is saddhahati tathagatassa bodhin. And so that reference is made in many suttas, including the Sekapatipada Sutta, Vittata Sutta, so many references to saddha. Now, in the case of a solitary Buddha or a silent Buddha, Pacceka Buddha, this is one who is enlightened by himself, but he doesn't proclaim the truth to the world. So there's also a definition in the Pugla Panyati, so Abhidhamma Pitaka, that says one who understands the truth by his own efforts, but does not obtain omniscience nor mastery over the fruits. And in the Pacceka Buddha Apadana, the Venerable Ananda asked the Buddha, through what causes do they become solitary Buddhas? And the Buddha answers that they are those who perform service among former Buddhas but didn't get freed during their dispensations, because that is the means to awaken, wise. They are with sharp knowing. Through knowledge and power, because of their wishes and also great strength, they reach awakening of solitary Buddhas. In every world, with the exception of me, there is no equal for the solitary Buddhas. So today we're not going to be focusing on these Pacceka Buddhas or solitary Buddhas, but we're going to focus on the Sammasambuddhas. However, if you're interested, the most important discourse on solitary Buddhas appears in the Sutta Nipata, which is the Kaggavisana Sutta. And this highlights a teaching on if you can't find a good teacher, it's better to wander alone. So one of the key things we want to investigate and understand today is how rare and difficult it is for a Buddha to appear or manifest in the world. So there are a number of discourses as well as sayings of the Buddha that highlight this. And we've looked at some of these references before, such as when we went through our session on precious human birth. But it's good to revisit it again in the context of realizing that the appearance of a Buddha is no ordinary birth. And by gaining a better understanding of the perfection of a fully enlightened Buddha, we can then also recognize it as a superior and incomparable birth to anyone in the world. Now, we often hear people comparing a Buddha to different kinds of living beings. So, this includes divine beings or deities, or to human beings who've lived in the past who may have done significant things in history, in philosophy, in science, in religion, or to even current meditation masters, religious figures, sages, philosophers, scientists. And they either don't know what a Buddha is, why he's called a Tathagata, and why he's declared chief among all beings, or maybe they've misunderstood something or someone has misrepresented what is taught by the Buddha. And so the comparisons they make it appear that they are equal to the Buddha or superior to the Buddha. So hopefully this session today will help to shine the light on why such comparisons are foolish, are flawed, and somewhat unwise. In fact, not somewhat, but very unwise. Now, the first sutta we can refer to is the Patubhava Sutta. And the Buddha lists 6 things which are rare, which we've actually gone through before. But the one that we're focusing on today is the first one, which is the manifestation of a Tathagata, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, is rare in the world. And these other ones that we've looked at before are also important, but probably not as relevant to today's session. Now, there's also a chapter in the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 1, and it's the chapter on one person, which is also worth referencing here. It says, one person, bhikkhus, arises in the world for the welfare and happiness of people, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of gods and humans. What one person? And of course, it is the Tathagata, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha. And the same thing is said for the appearance of one person that is rare in the world, and that is, of course, the Tathagata. Again, one person arises in the world who is an incredible human being, and this is also with reference to the Tathagata. And then it also says the death of one person is regretted by many people, and that person is also the Tathagata. And then one person arises in the world unique, without peer or counterpart, incomparable, matchless, unrivaled, unequaled, without equal, the best of men. And of course, that is the Tathagata. So when people read this, it's quite shocking because it's like, what does that mean? And so hopefully this session today will really look into that, because of the difficulty in becoming the Buddha, and the process to become a future Buddha is quite significant and vast. And the last things that it says in this chapter of one person is, with the appearance of one person, because there is the appearance of a great eye, a great light, a great radiance, and the 6 unsurpassed things, the realization of 4 kinds of textual analysis, the penetration of many and diverse elements, the realization of the fruit of knowledge and freedom, the realization of the fruits of stream entry, once return, non-return, and perfection. What one person? And of course, it's the Tathagata, the perfected one, the fully awakened Buddha. So these are some of the reasons why the Tathagata is incomparable, unrivaled, unequaled. But at this stage, there's still words, because we haven't been through the lengthy process and some of the details behind Buddha. Now, another reference that we've referred to is the second simile of the blind turtle. And in that, it also says it would be by chance, Venerable Sir, that the blind turtle, coming to the surface once every 100 years, would insert its neck into that yolk, into a single hole. So too, bhikkhus, it is by chance that one obtains the human state, by chance that a Tathagata, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, arises in the world, and of course, by chance that the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. And then we've also referred to the story of Erikapata, the Naga king. So that's Dhammapada, verse number 182, where the Buddha utters this verse that says, difficult it is to gain a human birth, difficult is the life of human beings, difficult is the chance to hear true Dhamma, and difficult is the arising of the Buddhas. And one more reference is an account in the Vinaya, and this is Sena Sanakandaka's verse or section. And this is where Anathapindika was visiting his brother-in-law in Rajagaha. And on that occasion, his brother-in-law had invited the Sangha for a dana. And not knowing what the grand preparations were for, Anathapindika asked his brother-in-law whether they were preparing for a wedding or a great sacrifice, or whether he had invited the king and the army to come for a meal. And his brother-in-law had said, "I'm not preparing for any of those things. I'm preparing for a great sacrifice. I've invited the Sangha headed by the Buddha for a meal tomorrow." And this was prior to Anathapindika meeting the Buddha. And so he asked, "Did you say Buddha?" And then his brother-in-law replied, "I did." And then Anathapindika asked another 2 times, "Did you say the Buddha? Did you say the Buddha?" And then he received exactly the same reply. And so then he said, "It's rare in the world to hear the word Buddha." So we can see from these different references the confirmation that it is indeed rare for a Buddha to appear in the world. And there's probably other references as well in the Sutta Pitaka. So we can now look at this idea about the appearances of Buddhas. So the Buddha Vamsa, or the Chronicle of Buddhas, or the Great Chronicle of Buddhas, refers to 2 distinct periods. There's the void eons, and in Pali that's known as Sunyakappa. And these are periods which are void or empty of Buddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, and universal monarchs. And the second one is non-void eons, so Asunyakappa. And these, of course, would be periods in which Buddhas, as well as Pacceka Buddhas and universal monarchs, have arisen or will arise in the world. Now, a kappa, often intended to refer to a mahakappa, this is defined as a world period or an inconceivably long time period, and we often translate that as an eon. Now, when we looked at the Anamataka Samyutta, so chapter 15 of the linked discourses, and that's where we examined the magnitude of samsara, there was a number of suttas that give us an indication about how long is an eon. And one of them that we often quote is the Pabbatta Sutta, so Samyutta Nikaya, discourse number 5 of chapter 15. And the Buddha says, "An eon is long, bhikkhu. It's not easy to count it and say it's so many years, or so many hundreds of years, or so many thousands of years, or so many hundreds of thousands of years." And so he provides this simile of a mountain to help us to comprehend, to get an idea about how long this is. He says, "It is possible, bhikkhu. Suppose, bhikkhu, there was a great stone mountain, a yojana long, a yojana wide, and a yojana high, without holes or crevices, one solid mass of rock. At the end of every 100 years, a man would stroke it once with a piece of Cajun cloth. The great stone mountain might by this effort be worn away, and eliminated by the eon, would still not have come to an end. So long is an eon, bhikkhu." And there's also another simile about accumulating bones the size of a mountain as well, to give an idea, like the length of time it would take. So in other suttas, a mahakappa is also referred to as a length of time needed for a world system to arise, to develop, and then to perish. And so a mahakappa is often talked about as consisting of 4 asankhya kappas, so periods of expansion, stabilization, contraction, and dissolution. Now, during non-void eons, so this is where Buddhas have arisen in the world, the commentary to the Buddha Vamsa sets out 5 distinct non-void eons. The first is Sarakappa, where only one Buddha arises in this eon. The second is Mandakappa, where only 2 Buddhas arise in this eon. The third is Varakappa, where only 3 Buddhas arise in this eon. And in that particular one, the first Buddha predicts or declares the second Buddha, and then the second declares the third. And then the fourth kind of kappa is Asaramanda kappa. And this is where only 4 Buddhas arise in this eon. And then the last one is Baddhakappa, where only 5 Buddhas arise in this eon. And so the Sutta Pitaka doesn't really give details about the timeline, but there are some commentarial notes that say, before our Buddha's aspiration was made, so before Gautama Buddha's aspiration was made, the 4 Buddhas, so Tanhankara, Medankara, Saranankara, and Dipankara arose in one eon. So this refers to the Saramanda Kappa, where 4 Buddhas arise. And then it says this was followed by one incalculable world period void of Buddhas. So this is the Sunya Kappas. And then in the final eon of that incalculable, only one Buddha named Kondanyo arose in that eon, Kondanya, referring to a Sara Kappa. And then again, following that, there was an incalculable world period void of Buddhas. So we don't really know how long that void period lasted. But then after that, at the end of the eon of the incalculable, 4 Buddhas, so Mangala Buddha, Sumana Buddha, Revata Buddha, Sobita Buddha, arose in one eon. And so this again refers to the Saramanda Kappa, where 4 Buddhas arise. And then again after that, there was another incalculable world period void of Buddhas. And in the final eon of that one, and 100,000 eons and an incalculable world period ago, 3 Buddhas arose. So Anomadasi Buddha, Paduma Buddha, Narada Buddha arose in one eon. And then again, there was another incalculable world period void of Buddhas. And then after that, in the final eon, there was so in the final eon of that incalculable world period, and 100,000 eons ago, only Padumuttara Buddha arose in one eon. So that refers to a Sarakappa. And then 30,000 eons ago, 2 Buddhas, so Sumedha Buddha and Sujata Buddha, arose in one eon. So that's a Mandakappa. And then 94 eons ago, 2 Buddhas, or actually 1 Buddha named Siddhartha Buddha arose in that one eon, so Sarakappa. Then 92 eons ago, 2 Buddhas, so Tissa Buddha and Pussa Buddha arose in one eon. And then 91 eons ago, the Lord Vipassi Buddha, so this is a Sarakappa. And then 31 eons ago, 2 Buddhas, so Sikhi Buddha and Vesabu Buddha arose. So that was a Mandakappa. And so in this Buddha eon, so it's an eon that has 5 Buddhas that would arise. We've already had 4 Buddhas, which is Kakusanda Buddha, Kona Gamana Buddha, Kassapa Buddha, and our fully awakened Gautama Buddha has arisen. And so the 5th one that has yet to come is Maitreya Buddha. So during this Buddhakappa, what we know is it's an auspicious or great eon. So for us, it's really difficult to imagine a period where no Buddhas appear in the world. And so we must remember that there are void eons. They're also known as dark eons. And these are these incalculable world periods where no Buddhas appear. And if there are no Buddhas, then there's no opportunity to hear the true teachings and to find the way out of this whole mass of suffering. So from what we've covered so far, we get some idea that it is rare for a Buddha to appear or manifest in the world. And to better appreciate this rare phenomenon, we need to understand why it is considered difficult for a Buddha to arise. So let's now look at the process of becoming a Buddha. What does it entail? What makes it unique compared to the birth of an ordinary human being or a divine being? And so again, we can learn much from the Buddhavamsa, this chronicle of Buddhas. And it gives details of about 25 Buddhas going as far back as Dipankara Buddha and all the way up to and including Gautama Buddha. So the first term we need to look at is a Bodhisattva. So a Bodhisattva is a being destined for Buddhahood, to become a future Buddha. And we know from the Sutta Pitaka that Gautama Buddha would often recount stories to the bhikkhus of what he contemplated prior to his enlightenment. And in doing so, he would refer to himself as a bodhisattva. For example, in Deveda Vitaka Sutta, a sutta that we've been through before, the Buddha starts by saying, Bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me. And then he goes on to instruct the bhikkhus. So prior to being declared a bodhisattva, a being destined to become a future Buddha, a few things need to happen. So in the Buddha Appadana, there's a chapter beginning with the Buddha, and it says, Among former Buddhas, I wished to become a Buddha. In my mind, there were Dhamma kings, Buddhas throughout incalculable eons. So this is one of the first things that actually happens when an aspirant, so not yet a bodhisattva, an aspirant makes a mental wish in his mind for the attainment of Buddhahood. And it's similar to a mental resolution or aspiration. And with former Buddhas for incalculable eons in their mind making that wish. And then the aspirant sets about accumulating merit for an undefined period. So this is part of what contributes to the difficulty of becoming a future Buddha. There is no set period or indication of how much merit is actually needed. And then for an aspirant's wish to become a Buddha to succeed, one of the 8 conditions is that they must do some act of merit, an adhikara in Pali, in honor of a living Buddha, who will then make the declaration that they will attain Buddhahood under a certain name in the future. So these meritorious actions often took the form of a gift or gifts to the Buddha and his order, or sometimes only to the Buddha. And we know from the chapter on Sumeda's wish, so this is the second chapter in the Buddha Vamsa, that at the time of Dipankara Buddha, Gautama Buddha was Sumeda, the matted-haired ascetic. And what he did as his adhikara was to loosen his hair, spread out his bark garments and the piece of hide on the ground, and he laid down, offering up his body and garments as a walkway for the Buddha and his disciples to tread upon rather than the muddy ground. And at the same time, while he was lying on the ground, he resolved, if I so wished, I could burn up my defilements today. What is the use while I remain unknown of realizing Dhamma here? Having reached omniscience, I will become a Buddha in the world with the Devas. What is the use of my crossing over alone, being a man aware of my strength? Having reached omniscience, I will cause the world together with the Devas to cross over. By this act of merit, towards the supreme among men, I will reach omniscience. I will cause many people to cross over. Cutting through the stream of samsara, shattering the 3 becomings, embarking in the ship of Dhamma, I will cause the world with the Devas to cross over. Human existence, male, cause, seeing a teacher, going forth, attainment of the special qualities, an act of merit and strong will. By combining these 8 things, the resolve succeeds. And so this passage from the Buddha Vamsa confirms a number of things, which is for Sumeda Bodhisattva, or Sumeda at the time, to progress from aspirant to Bodhisattva, he formalizes his earlier mental wish, made with the former Buddhas in mind, by making a great aspiration to become a future Buddha. And this is known as Abhinihara in Pali. And this is done in the presence of a living Buddha, which is also rare indeed. So in this case, it was Dipankara Buddha. And for the aspiration to succeed, he also said that the aspirant needs to be endowed with 8 factors. So these are human birth and male birth, cause. So in terms of human birth, we know that is also very difficult to gain. And in terms of male birth, the Buddha has said in numerous suttas that a female cannot become a Buddha. He says in the Dutiya Vagga of Anguttara Nikaya, it is impossible because it cannot happen for a woman to be perfected one, a fully awakened Buddha, but it is possible for a man to be perfected one, a fully awakened Buddha. And this is from also the Bahudatuka Sutta. It could also be inferred that one needs to accumulate greater wholesome karma to overcome defilements and the suffering associated with the female birth. And the third thing of the 8 things is the cause. And this is to be able to attain arahantship in the future. And then seeing a teacher is the 4th. So this is making an aspiration before a living Buddha. And then the 5th is going forth. So at the time of the aspiration, being an ascetic who believes in karma, so has the right view, and is a member of a member of a community of bhikkhus during a dispensation of the Buddha. And then the sixth condition is attainment of special qualities. So that means one is endowed with attainments such as the jhanas and higher spiritual powers. And the seventh is the act of merit. So the act of merit that was done in order to become a bodhisattva, but also intense effort to develop perfections, those paramis, without regard to one's life. And the last one is the strong will, in Pali Chandata. So this is the strong desire or firm resolution that is unwavering towards becoming a future Buddha. So this properly completes the strong aspiration towards becoming the Buddha, where this being is now worthy of receiving the declaration, which in Pali is Vyakarana, from a living Buddha. So it then goes on, Dipankara, knower of the worlds, recipient of offerings, standing near my head spoke these words. Do you see this very severe ascetic, a matted hair ascetic? Innumerable eons from now, he will be a Buddha in the world, having departed from the delightful city of Kapila. The Tathagata will strive the striving and perform austerities. After sitting at the root of the upper Japala tree and accepting milk rice there, the Tathagata will go to the Niranjara. When he has partaken of the milk rice on the bank of the Niranjara, that conqueror will go to the root of the tree of awakening by the glorious way prepared. Then, having circumambulated the days of the tree of awakening, the unsurpassed one of great renown will awaken at the root of an asatta tree. His genetics and mother will be named Maya, his father Suddhodana. He will be named Gautama. Kolita and Upatissa, taintless, stains gone, tranquil in mind, concentrated, will be the chief disciples. Ananda will be the name of the attendant who will attend on this conqueror. Kema and Upalavanna will be the chief women disciples. Taintless, stains gone, tranquil in mind, concentrated. That Lord's tree of awakening is said to be the Asatta tree. Chitta and Hathalavaka will be the chief lay attendants. Nandamata and Uttara will be the chief women lay attendants. When they heard these words of the great seer, who was without an equal, men and deities rejoicing thought, Sprout of the Buddha seed is this. And the acclamation went on. The inhabitants of the 10,000 world systems with the devas clapped their hands, laughed, and paid homage with clasped hands, saying, if we should fail of the dispensation of this protector of the world, so in this case it was Dipankara Buddha, in the distant future we will be face to face with this one. And so the Bodhisattva proceeds from this point, having the living Buddha make the declaration, to proceeding to investigate the practices required to become a Buddha. And this is known as the Buddhakaraka Dhamma. And this entails fulfilling the 10 perfections, the Dasaparami. So when you read the accounts of the Bodhisattvas in the Buddhavansa, it's really quite remarkable to learn about their understanding of dukkha. It's also remarkable the attainments of special knowledges and supernormal powers, and yet it is not sufficient for them to simply become a Buddha just like that. For example, Sumedha Bodhisattva, he lived only on fruits that fell from trees. He didn't lie down at all. Instead, he made strenuous effort in the 3 other postures of sitting, standing, and walking. And only at the end of 7 days, which is also very, very remarkable, he achieved the 8 attainments, so form jhanas and formless attainments, and he had the 5 higher spiritual powers, 5 abhinyas. And he abided in the bliss of those mental absorptions in the forest, unaware of the appearance of Dipankara Buddha in the world. So for us, that is a massive feat. It sounds amazing, it sounds quite rare. However, from the perspective of a great aspiration to become a future Buddha, we learn that much, much more is needed. The fulfillment of 10 perfections is needed. And that in of itself lends weight to what we heard earlier from the Buddha, that the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, is declared to be chief among all beings. So after fulfilling the perfections and a number of other things as well, in their penultimate life, all bodhisattvas are born into the Tussita Deva realm. And that's where they await their final birth. And at the suitable time, the bodhisattva makes 5 decisions about his final birth. So the continent and the country. So that's 2 things. So Buddhas are only born in Jambudvipa, and there too only in Majjhima Desa. And the third is a decision about family. So Buddhas are born only in Brahmin or Khattiya, so like elite families, whichever is more esteemed during that particular age. And then the fourth is the mother must be wise and virtuous. And the fifth is that her life must be destined to end 7 days after the Buddha's birth. So once these decisions are made, the Jatakas mention that the Bodhisattva goes to a place called Nandanavana and in the Tusita world, and from there wanders around just before his descent into the final mother's womb. So that's a bit of a simplistic overview of the general process. There are more particulars, but I think that's sufficient for what we're looking at today. Now let's take a look at the 10 perfections or Dasaparami. Now it's said that it's impossible for a bodhisattva to become a Buddha before completing the necessary period to fulfill these 10 perfections. So the full time period, according to the commentaries, it lasts 100,000 eons plus 4 or 8 or 16 asankhayas. And the minimum duration is said to be 100,000 eons and 4 asankhayas from the time of receiving the declaration to the last existence when the bodhisattva fulfills the perfections. So that is incredible. When you think about an eon being that simile of a mountain and rubbing it with a cloth, you think about 100,000 eons and then 4 asankhayas as well. It's just not fathomable. Like if we were to think of the number of births taken by a bodhisattva during such a period, it's apparently said that it would be greater than the number of drops of water in a great ocean. So it's definitely hard for us to fathom such a lengthy time period, given our human lifespan is so short in comparison to an eon, just even one single eon, and yet we think our lifespan is quite long as we go through it. So these perfections are the fulfillment of noble qualities that include things like generosity and virtue, and these are untainted by any defilements because they're perfected. So things such as craving or wrong view are abandoned. And it is said that Mahakaruna, great compassion, and Panya, of course, wisdom, are the bases for these 10 perfections. So it is through wisdom that a bodhisattva attains omniscience, that a bodhisattva can cross the ocean of samsara, that he can understand thoroughly the suffering of living beings, and that he becomes wearied of suffering, and then, of course, aspires for nibbana. So that's through wisdom. And through great compassion, this Mahakaruna, a bodhisattva is able to perform the duties of a Buddha, able to help living beings, endeavors to alleviate their suffering, and accepts the same suffering as happiness in order to work for the liberation of living beings, and therefore continues to go through all the rounds of rebirth in samsara in order to become the Buddha. So it's said that Sumedha Bodhisattva was so accomplished in the spiritual attainments at the time of meeting Dipankara Buddha that he could have attained Nibbana if he desired at that time. But he was endowed with supreme compassion, so not great compassion, but supreme compassion. And so he endured much suffering in samsara to fulfill the perfections in order to liberate many others, including ourselves. So this is a common feature of the 10 perfections. They are perfected for the benefit of others and to assist others. And a bodhisattva has that wish in their mind as they're undertaking to fulfill the 10 perfections. So as it says on this slide, the 10 perfections are the perfection of giving, dana parami, the perfection of virtue, which is Sila Parami, the perfection of renunciation, Nekama Parami, the perfection of wisdom, Panya Parami, the perfection of energy, Virya Parami, the perfection of patience, which is Kanti Parami, the perfection of truth, which is Satya Parami, the perfection of resolute determination, which is Adhitthana Parami, and the ninth one is perfection of loving kindness, Metta Parami, and the 10th is perfection of equanimity, so Upekkha Parami. So Sumedha Bodhisattva investigated them in this order and also fulfilled them in this order. And after his enlightenment, he taught them in the same order that he had practiced them. Now, the Jatakas, which we know as the past birth stories, and the stories contained in the Charya Pitaka commentary, which is also in the Khuddaka Nikaya, they're only a small sample out of a vast ocean of stories about what a bodhisattva has undertaken to fulfill the perfections. And according to the Charya Pitaka commentary, a bodhisattva will ceaselessly and uniquely strive to fulfill these perfections, as well as renunciating, so there's chaga, and also developing virtues through practice, so charya. And these are the requisites for 1, achieving, path knowledge of arahantship. So this is in Pali Arahata Magga Jnana. And then omniscience, which is this Sabbanyutta Jnana, the 73 knowledges which make up omniscience. So this is a very large subject on the 10 perfections. So we won't be able to do it justice today, but we'll broadly look at each of the perfections and maybe save the rest of the detail, including the stories from the Jatakas and the Charya Pitaka, for a future session or sessions, because it's actually very worthwhile. You'll see once we go through them broadly. So the first one is the perfection of giving, Dana Parami. And this is a quality that a bodhisattva would have already followed and practiced before. To fulfill this, the bodhisattva needs to abandon or give up one's property or wealth. And it has this characteristic of relinquishing. The objective is to destroy the greed that clings to material things. And its proximate cause are the objects to be given up. So the way it manifests is non-attachment towards objects of property or wealth that one gives up. And the result of course, as we know from the suttas, is giving results in a happy destination endowed with wealth and prosperity in future births. And so by giving away all one's wealth, one fulfills the perfection of giving. However, one fulfills the higher perfection of giving by giving up any of one's limbs. One fulfills ultimate perfection of giving by sacrificing one's life. And we know from the Jatakas that the Buddha has done this before as the Bodhisattva. So for Sumedha Bodhisattva, what he reflected, and this is given in the Buddha Vamsa, is the first perfection, that of giving, the great path pursued by the great seers of old. You, having made firm, undertake and go on to this first perfection, that of giving, if you wish to attain awakening, as a full jar overturned by whatever it may be, discharges the water completely and does not retain there. So, seeing supplicants low, high, and middling give a gift completely like the overturned jar. So in your own time, because there'll be similes for each of the 10, it's valuable to contemplate them individually. And from this particular simile, one gets the very strong idea that the perfection of giving is about giving up completely, with nothing kept back. Now, the second perfection is the perfection of virtue, Sila Parami. And the Buddha says that to fulfill this, one needs to abstain from wrongdoing, from any unwholesome actions. And it has the characteristic of not allowing one's physical and verbal actions to be unwholesome and to develop the wholesome. So it's the foundation for skillful activity. We know this from the Metta Bhavana as Uju and Suju, like being upright and very upright. But think of this perfection as taking that to the max. So the objective here, it has the thing of preventing from indulging in immorality, in unvirtuous conduct, such as the three kinds of unwholesome physical actions, so killing, taking what is not given, and sexual misconduct, so abstaining from those unwholesome actions. And then in terms of unwholesome verbal actions, it involves abstaining from false speech, harsh speech, divisive speech, and empty speech. So this assists towards virtue that becomes purified, blameless. And its proximate cause, as we can understand, are the protectors. So what do we know of the protectors? We know them as moral shame. So this is hiri in Pali. And also fear of wrongdoing, otapa. So as a seiko or trainee, these are two of the powers of a trainee. And so this perfection of virtue, it manifests as purity in speech and physical actions. And the results of virtuous conduct, similar to giving, is it results in a happy destination. So for Sumedha Bodhisattva, he reflected the second perfection, that of virtue, followed and practiced by the great seers of old, you having made firm, undertake and go on to the second first perfection, that of virtue, if you wish to attain awakening. Sorry, that's supposed to be just second perfection. And then he thinks, and as a yak cow, if her tail is caught in anything, does not injure her tail, but goes to death there so, fulfilling the moral habits in the four planes, protect virtue continuously like the yak cow her tail. So again, in your own time, it can be very valuable contemplating this simile. Now, from this simile, one gets the idea that to be like the yak cow, protecting its tail, ensuring it doesn't get caught in anything or becoming injured, in this way, in a similar way, one would guard one's virtue, ensuring that the result is only a happy destination or higher. So, the next perfection is the perfection of renunciation, so Nekama Parami. And to fulfill this, it's said that one needs to aspire to abandon craving for sensual pleasures, having understood the danger in desire for objects of sensual pleasure, and also to understand the danger of breeding sensual defilement. So all these things that we looked at in terms of the Chula Dukkha Kanda Sutta and the gradual teachings on the danger in sensual pleasures, these are all what underpins this particular perfection. So it has the characteristic of freedom from sensual desires or liberation from sensual desires, and also from existence due to sensuality. And of course, the objective is to really see the danger in sensuality, in sensual pleasures. And its proximate cause is to develop a sense of urgency. And so it manifests in turning away from sensual pleasures or seeking seclusion from sensual pleasures, maybe through form jhanas or the formless attainments and things like that, and also to be away from defilements. So for Sumedha Bodhisattva, he reflected the third perfection, that of renunciation, followed and practiced by the great seers of old, you having made, undertake and go on to this third perfection, that of renunciation, if you wish to attain awakening. And so he says to himself, as a man who for long has lived painfully afflicted in a prison, does not generate attachment there, but seeks only freedom, so do you see all existences as prison. Be one turned towards renunciation for the utter release from becoming. So again, in your own time, contemplate this simile. What we get just at the surface level is you get this idea, an understanding that there is suffering associated with the prison of all realms of existence, all 31 realms of existence, because what we want is to be able to give up any attachment or craving from all of these prisons, all of these existences. And so by perfecting renunciation, realizing renunciation, this is part of seeking freedom from these prisons, from all these existences. So I'll just pause here for just a few moments to take a sip of water. So now we come to the fourth perfection, which is the perfection of wisdom. And it said to fulfill this, one needs to penetrate all aspects of the Dhamma, which makes sense. It's the perfection of wisdom. And it has the characteristic of penetrating the real nature of Dhamma that is contemplated. So the objective becomes to illuminate like a lamp, dispelling the darkness. So this is to overcome delusion. And you really see this when the Panya Indriya, the wisdom spiritual faculty, has been developed very well. Like even Buddhas would be much, much more illuminated. But for someone who is developing these indriyas, the Panya Indriyas, it's light. It's very much light. So it dispels all the blocks, defilements, delusion that can cover the mind. And so its proximate cause is concentration, which makes perfect sense. And also it could be a proximate cause is the Four Noble Truths. So one really penetrates an understanding about our predicament. And the way it manifests, as would be expected, is to have non-confusion, which means that there is clarity with regards to all these dhammas that are contemplated. So for Sumedha Bodhisattva, he reflects, the fourth perfection, that of wisdom, followed and practiced by the great seers of old. You, having made firm, undertake and go on to this fourth perfection, that of wisdom, if you wish to attain awakening. And as a monk looking for alms, not avoiding low, high, or middling families, acquires sustenance thus. So you, questioning discerning people all the time, going on to the perfection of wisdom, will attain self-awakening. So again, a valuable simile to contemplate in your own time. From this simile, one gets the idea of constantly seeking the truth with discernment, like a monk who looks for alms to acquire sustenance. So the fifth perfection is the perfection of energy, so virya parami. And to fulfill this, one needs to develop physical and mental endurance for the welfare or benefit of others. And it has the characteristic of striving and enduring pain or suffering. So the objective is to support and strengthen other factors that arise together so that they don't become weakened or lax in performing these wholesome and meritorious activities towards future Buddhahood. And its proximate cause is, of course, a sense of urgency, but it's also the 8 factors that arouse energy. So in Pali, this is Viryaramba Vatu. And we've come across this before in the Kusita Ramba Vatu Sutta. We examined it when we looked at the story of Theratissa, the idle one, and the reference there is Dhammapada, verse number 280. And if you remember from that sutta, there are 2 factors related to work, 2 factors relating to travel, 2 factors relating to meals, and 2 factors relating to illness, where one is encouraged away from indolence, which is kusita in Pali, and encouraged towards arousing energy, which is this viryaramba. And the way it manifests is, of course, which we know also from Ara, the video, a trainee's quality, is steadfastness, persistence, not shirking from one's duties. So the Bodhisattva would not shirk away, would persist, would be steadfast, would keep arousing energy towards the goal of becoming a future Buddha and being able to perfect all the 10 perfections. And so it's the opposite, the complete opposite of Thina-mitta, dullness and drowsiness, which would not support these wholesome and meritorious activities of a bodhisattva. So Sumedha Bodhisattva reflected, the 5th perfection, that of energy, followed and practiced by the great seers of old. You, having made firm, undertake and go on to this 5th perfection, that of energy, if you wish to attain awakening. And as a lion, the king of beasts, whether he is lying down, standing, or walking, is not of sluggish energy, but is always exerting himself. So you too, firmly exerting energy in every becoming, going on to the perfection of energy, will attain self-awakening. So, another valuable simile to contemplate. Now, from this simile, one gets the idea of being like a lion, the king of beasts. And we often hear the Buddha referenced in this way, particularly about his lion's roar. And when we contemplate the lion, as is said here by the Bodhisattva, it's not allowing one to slack off, not to shirk away, and to continuously arouse energy like this king of the beasts, and to persist in moving towards one's goal. And then the sixth is the perfection of patience or forbearance, so khanti parami. And to fulfill this, one needs to develop tolerance towards unwholesome activities of others. So, this is a really interesting one because many of us, just simply as we are, not very tolerant of unwholesome behavior in others, particularly once we start developing the Dhamma path. And what the Buddha says is that having such intolerance is actually grounded in non aversion, is actually, having intolerance is grounded in aversion and hate. And when you develop this kind of parami, that is grounded in non aversion and non hate. And so this has the characteristic of bearing with, being able to endure the conditions. So, a good example just in everyday life is if you have family members who don't wish to turn to the Dhamma, then you're patient. You don't make any sharp moves to try and drag them to Dhamma, which the Buddha doesn't recommend, but you patiently endure how they are with the hope that at some point in this lifetime that they do come towards the path that you are developing. And so, from the perspective of a bodhisattva, you think about the perfection of patience. It can be so remarkable when this is perfected because we know how hard it is to bear with, to endure when our loved ones, when many beings in the world are walking the wrong path and are heading towards a very, very unhappy destination. So, the objective for the bodhisattva in perfecting patience is to overcome both agreeable and disagreeable objects. So, agreeable objects are manapa ramana, and that's associated with the greed path. And disagreeable objects are the amanapa ramana, which is associated with the hate path. So, when they fulfill this perfection of patience or forbearance, what they're developing is really non greed and non hatred, and they're abandoning greed and hatred. And by doing so, they're able to overcome all kinds of sense objects, whether they're agreeable nor disagreeable or disagreeable. So the proximate cause here is to see things as they really are, yatha bhuta dasana in Pali. And so this manifests as acceptance, tolerance of both agreeable and disagreeable objects, and some very strong non-resistance towards them. So for Sumedha Bodhisattva, he reflected the sixth perception, that of patience, followed and practiced by the great seers of old. You having made firm, undertake and go on to this sixth perfection, that of patience, if you wish to attain awakening. And so he likens it to, and as the earth endures all that is thrown down on it, both pure and impure, and shows no repugnance or approval, so you too, patient in all respect and disrespect, going on to the perfection of patience, will attain self-awakening. So, another valuable simile. And from this simile, you get the idea of this earth. It endures with no resistance any kind of action or activity without resistance or approval. And in the same way, the bodhisattva would practice with this kind of endurance to bear with, to not go either way, to be repulsed or to approve, and to be patient in all respect and disrespect. And when you look at that, when it comes back even to developing our own parami towards this perfection of patience, when we're insulted or when we're praised, there's something that we don't shake with that. We're actually very patient with it. And as we all know, on this Dhamma path, we constantly get, in some ways, abused or in some ways disrespected for the path that we've chosen. And it's important to see this in this particular parami, that we can bear with this, we can understand this. And likewise with praise, that's not to be raised any higher either, that with praise, which is also a very worldly thing, comes blame or insults and things like that. So many of these paramis, now we're not going through the stories of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva's journey, but we can also relate a lot of these paramis to our own practice. And maybe that's something we can look at in another session, about how we can apply and generate even a small bit towards the perfection of these paramis. So the seventh one is the perfection of truth. So Satya Parami. And to fulfill this, the Bodhisattva needs to develop truthfulness in speech, as well as being able to keep one's word. So it has the characteristic of veracity, which means habitually observing truthfulness in one's speech. And the objective is to make clear the truth as it really is. So the proximate cause is purity in one's conduct by body, speech, and mind. And it manifests as nobility, a sweetness in one's speech, and a pleasantness in one's speech. And for Sumedha Bodhisattva, he reflected the seventh perfection, that of truth speaking, followed and practiced by the great seers of old, you having made firm, undertake and go on to this seventh, by speech without double meaning, therein you will attain self-awakening. And as Osadi is balanced for devas and mankind in all times and seasons, and does not deviate from her source, so you too must not deviate from the course of the truths. Going on to the perfection of truth speaking, you will attain self-awakening. So another valuable simile, Osadi in this respect refers to a star that emanates great brightness and whiteness in the sky. And so you get this idea of purity and brightness. So this is inferring one mustn't deviate from purity and the guiding light of truthfulness, and one keeps purifying as one develops this parami. So for the Bodhisattva, it is done to the perfect degree. And it also references in many ways the Four Noble Truths, because this is the course of truths that we are walking and developing. And this is the four truths upon which all Tathagatas, all Buddhas enlighten. So the eighth perfection is the perfection of resolute determination, Adhitthana Parami. And to fulfill this, one needs to have a strong and resolute determination to pursue this wholesome and meritorious path, in the case of the Bodhisattva, to become a future Buddha, and not to shake from this course. So it has the characteristic of unshakable determination to fulfill the perfections and to renunciate and to take up virtuous practices that are the requisites for enlightenment and for becoming a future Buddha. And the objective is to overcome all unwholesome and demeritorious actions that don't support the requisites of enlightenment and becoming a future Buddha. And so the proximate cause becomes the requisites of enlightenment. And so the way it manifests is unshakability, being very steadfast towards the fulfillment of these requisites for enlightenment. And so for Sumedha Bodhisattva, he reflected the eighth perfection, that of resolute determination, followed and practiced by the great seers of old. You, having made firm, undertake this eighth, being stable therein, will attain self-awakening. And as a mountain, a rock, stable and firmly based, does not tremble in the rough winds, but remains in precisely its own place, so you too must be constantly stable in resolute determination. Going on to the perfection of resolute determination, you will attain self-awakening. So from this simile, one gets the idea of unshakable, immovable mountain. So our resolute determination must be unwavering, unshakable, firm like a mountain. And in the case of a bodhisattva, very much so. And this needs to be perfected in order to fulfill the 10 perfections, but also for the ultimate goal of becoming a future Buddha. So the ninth perfection is the perfection of loving kindness, so the Metta Parami. So to fulfill this one, the Bodhisattva needs to be of service for the welfare and happiness of the world. So you can see Metta is grounded in non-hate. So it has the characteristic of well-wishing, like having the well-being, the supreme safety and happiness of all living beings in one's mind. And the objective is to work towards fulfilling that wish. So the aspiration to become a future Buddha is for the welfare of all living beings. There is a metta quality to it. And its proximate cause is seeing all living beings as agreeable. So the reason for this is because if one has, for example, an attitude of seeing some living beings as disagreeable, then there would be aversion or hatred there. And so it's not possible to have this metta quality. So it's being able to see all living beings as somewhat agreeable in order to have their welfare in mind. And so it manifests as mental serenity and tranquility. We know this from the cultivation of metta, our small way of cultivating metta, as being firmly planted in equality, in oneness, in having purified for the 10 skilled states, that one has this serenity and tranquility towards all living beings, having no distinction amongst them, neither having prejudice or bias or all that kind of thing. So for Sumedha Bodhisattva, he reflected the ninth perfection, that of loving kindness, followed and practiced by the great seers of old. You, having made firm undertaking this ninth, be without equal in loving kindness, if you wish to attain awakening. And as water pervades with coolness good and evil people alike, and carries away dust and dirt, so you too, by developing loving kindness for friend and for equally, going on to the perfection of loving kindness, will attain self-awakening. So valuable simile, because when you reflect on this, you get the idea of the coolness of water that pervades everything all in the same way. And one has to develop loving kindness or metta in a similar way, with coolness, without the heat of any aversion, without preferences, without biases, being able to see that we are all equal in our samsaric predicament and this whole massive suffering. And so the Bodhisattva fulfills this to perfection. So you can imagine when you think about Maitreya Buddha to come, and he is now in Tusitadeva realm, that he has perfected this, given his name to something that we cannot even fathom. And sometimes when you meditate on metta and you connect with even the idea of the Bodhisattva in Tusitadeva, who is to come as Maitreya Buddha, what suffuses the mind and the body as one cultivates metta is something so sublime, something out of this world, something that gives a taste, like a precious taste of a quality of metta that we haven't tasted before. And then the last and 10th perfection is the perfection of equanimity. And to fulfill this, one needs to develop impartiality towards all conditions, to be equanimous. And it has the characteristic of neither agreeable nor disagreeable, neither pleasant nor painful. So the objective of this is really to have equanimity, to have an impartial view. So the proximate cause is the reflection that all beings are the owners of their karma, heir to their karma. They have karma as their origin, karma as their relative, and karma as their support. They are the heir of whatever karma, good or bad, that they do. So we know this from our 5 subjects to frequently contemplate. And it manifests as subduing agreeable or disagreeable, and also the pleasant and painful. So for Sumedha Bodhisattva, he reflected the 10th perfection, that of equanimity, followed and practiced by the great seers of old. You, having made firm, undertake this 10th, being balanced and firm. will attain self-awakening. And as the earth is indifferent to the impure and pure, thrown down on it, and avoids both anger and courtesy, so you too must be balanced, always in the face of the pleasant and unpleasant, and going on to the perfection of equanimity, you will attain self-awakening. So this has something very similar to what we're talking about with patience. You can see that there are certain links between all these perfections, and there's probably a sequence, a jnanapada in it, in the way that Sumedha Bodhisattva has practiced them and understood them. But from this particular simile, one definitely gets the idea that the earth is indifferent and impartial towards any kind of action or activity, which means there's neither greed nor hatred there, and nothing arises such as anger or something more pleasant out of these kinds of activities. So, in the same way, when one develops the same kind of indifference or balanced view, impartiality towards whatever arises, whatever conditions arise which are agreeable, disagreeable, pleasant, or painful, then it can be a very, very powerful thing. So these are the 10 perfections, broadly speaking. There's so much more that we haven't covered in terms of some of these wonderful things that the Bodhisattva actually did, but there's just not sufficient time to go through it, and also to look at it from our own perspective, how valuable it is towards our goal on the spiritual path and how we stay safe on the Dhamma path as well. But we'll look at investigating that and delving into that in future sessions if you're interested in that. So we can now come back to looking at some of the unique qualities of the Buddha, and they include also as a bodhisattva. So one particular sutta that I wanted to go through was this Acharya Bhuta Sutta, which literally means wonderful and marvelous. And in this particular sutta, Venerable Ananda explains the Tathagata's wonderful and marvelous qualities. And what you'll see is also in respect of when Gautama Buddha was a bodhisattva. So I'll simply read out what these are so we can take these qualities into our mind. So then the Blessed One addressed Venerable Ananda. That being so, Ananda, explain more fully the Tathagata's wonderful and marvelous qualities. And he says, I heard and learned this, Venerable Sir, from the Blessed One's own lips. Mindful and fully aware, the Bodhisattva appeared in the Tusita heaven. So that's one thing. Second, mindful and fully aware, the Bodhisattva remained in the Tusita heaven. Third, for the whole of his lifespan, the Bodhisattva remained in the Tusita heaven. And this specifically relates to Gautama Buddha. Fourth is mindfully and fully aware, so with clear comprehension, the Bodhisattva passed away from the Tusita heaven and descended into his mother's womb, so fully conscious. The fifth is when the Bodhisattva passed away from the Tusita heaven and descended into the mother's womb, then a great immeasurable light, surpassing the splendor of the gods, appeared in the world with its gods, its Maras, and its Brahmas, in this generation with its recluses and Brahmins, with its princes and its people, and even in those abysmal worlds, interspaces of vacancy, gloom, and utter darkness, where the moon and the sun, mighty and powerful as they are, cannot make the light prevail. There too a great immeasurable light, surpassing the splendor of gods, appeared, and the beings reborn there perceived each other by that light. So indeed, sir, there are other beings reborn here, and this 10,000-fold world system shook and quaked and trembled, and there too are great immeasurable lights surpassing the splendor of the gods appeared. So some of these, when you take them into your mind, you realize that it's no simple feat. Like the light that comes in this fifth one, it's part of the perfection of wisdom. When you think about what the Bodhisattva had to go through in order to perfect wisdom and the light that dispels delusion. So this gives you a bit of an idea. When you read it without understanding the paramis, it doesn't really make that much sense. You get an idea if you have a lot of saddha, But if you don't have a lot of saddha or conviction, you need to delve deeper into understanding that process of becoming a Buddha. Then you realize how many births it took to perfect, and we can't even fathom those births, and how many eons of practicing these perfections to fulfillment. And so that's how you understand why it's considered wonderful and marvelous. So then Venerable Ananda goes on and says, when the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, 4 young deities came to guard him at the 4 quarters, so that no humans or non-humans or anyone at all could harm the Bodhisattva or his mother. The 7th is when the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, she became intrinsically virtuous, refraining from killing living beings, from taking what is not given, from misconduct in sensual pleasures, from false speech, and from wines, liquors, and intoxicants, which are the basis of negligence. So that's also very remarkable. Then the 8th is when the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb. No sensual thought arose in her concerning men, and she was inaccessible to any man having a lustful mind. The 9th is when the Bodhisattva descended into his mother's womb, she obtained the 5 cords of sensual pleasure, and furnished and endowed with them, she enjoyed herself with them. And then the 10th is when the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, no kind of affliction arose in her. She was blissful and free from bodily fatigue. So most women would find this quite amazing. And she saw the Bodhisattva within her womb with all his limbs lacking no faculty. And it gives this simile. Suppose a blue, yellow, red, white, or brown thread were strung through a fine beryl gem of purest water, 8-faceted, well cut, and a man with good sight were to take it in his hand and review it thus. This is a fine beryl gem of purest white, 8-faceted, well cut, and though it is strung a blue, yellow, red, white, or brown thread, so too when the Bodhisattva had descended into his mother's womb, and so on and so forth. And then the last one is 7 days after the birth of a Bodhisattva, his mother died and reappeared in the Tusita heaven. So that's a wonderful and marvelous thing, despite her having passed away only after 7 days. So she had a happy destination. So number 12, other women give birth after carrying the child in the womb for 9 or 10 months, but not so the Bodhisattva's mother. The Bodhisattva's mother gave birth to him after carrying him in her womb for exactly 10 months. The 13th is other women give birth seated or lying down, but not so the Bodhisattva's mother. The Bodhisattva's mother gave birth to him standing up. And then the 14th is when the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, first gods received him, then human beings. And then the 15th is when the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, he did not touch the earth. The 4 young gods received him and set him before his mother, saying, "Rejoice, O Queen, a son of great power has been born to you." And then the 16th is when the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, he came forth unsullied, unsmeared by water or humus or blood or any kind of impurity, clean and unsullied. Suppose there were a gem placed of kasi cloth, then the gem would not smear the cloth or the cloth the gem. Why is that? Because of the purity of both. And again, this is a testament to the perfections, the paramis. The Buddha as a bodhisattva fulfilled the perfection of virtue and many other things. And then the 17th one, when the bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, 2 jets of water appeared to pour from the sky, one cool and one warm, for bathing the bodhisattva and his mother. And then the 18th is as soon as the bodhisattva was born, he stood firmly with his feet on the ground. Then he took 7 steps facing north. And with a white parasol held over him, he surveyed each quarter and uttered the words of the leader of the herd. "I am the highest in the world. I am the best in the world. I am the foremost in the world. This is my last birth. Now there is no renewal of being for me." And that is actually quite amazing, having been born and to hear that he would express that. But then when you understand the length of time, the difficulty to perfect, then you really understand the fruition of becoming a Buddha. That this is the accumulation of merit, the accumulation of all that work of the Buddha or the Bodhisattva to this highest degree. And so that's why he's considered chief among all beings in the world, the foremost. So there's only two more things, and one of them is the last thing that is stated by Venerable Ananda, which is when the Bodhisattva came forth from his mother's womb, then a great immeasurable light, surpassing the splendor of gods, appeared in the world with its gods, its Maras and Brahmas. And so again, the same kind of thing. There was another quake, powerful earthquake. And then the Buddha says, that being so, Ananda, remember this too as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. Hear, Ananda, for the Tathagata, feelings are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Perceptions are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Thoughts are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Remember this too, Ananda, as a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. So, as we've seen, there are certain events with regards to the Bodhisattva and the Tathagata that are the cause and condition for powerful earthquakes. So this is when the 10,000th world system shakes, shudders, and trembles. And so the 6 events out of the 8 are when the Bodhisattva passes away from the Tusita order and mindful and clearly comprehended, he enters his mother's womb. Also when he emerges from his mother's womb, when he awakens to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment, also when he sets in motion the unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma, and also when he's mindful and clearly comprehending, he lets go of his vital life force. And lastly, when he attains final Nibbana by the Nibbana element without residue remaining. So the fact that there are such powerful earthquakes confirms that these events are no ordinary occurrence. They herald something exceedingly significant and important for the well-being and welfare, for the benefit of all living beings, including us. So you start to build this picture, this very strong picture. So there are differences amongst Buddhas, and there are also similarities and things that are the same for Buddhas. So we're going to look at that now. The Buddha Vamsa and its commentary gives details about differences amongst the Buddha. And there are 7 that are included here as differences. So take a look at that for a moment while I take another sip of water. So the first one is lifespan, and that's in the time period in which they are born. The second is height as well as social class. That's another kind of difference. And as we said before, some are born into affluent families while others are born as Brahmins. And the third is duration performing austerities. So it differs between Buddhas. And we're going to look at a table next that shows some of these things, not all of them, but some of them. And then the fourth one is the aura of a Buddha. So it's said that the Buddha can spread his aura at will, but it's also said that for different Buddhas, the spread of their aura, it differs. So in the case of, for example, Mangala Buddha, his aura spread throughout 10,000 world systems, while Gautama Buddha's aura extended only 1 fathom. So that's a difference there. But as we know, a Buddha can extend it at will. So if Gautama Buddha wanted to extend it further, he would have been able to. The fifth is the means of conveyance, and this relates to when he's still a householder. Before becoming a Buddha, he makes his great sacrifice or renunciation, and he departs household life for going forth. And so this talks about the means of transport for doing that, whether it's by horse or carriage or some other means. And then the sixth is the type of Bodhi tree under which the Buddha attains enlightenment. And so there are various different trees that have been sat under by Buddhas in the past. And the seventh is the size of the seat under the Bodhi tree also differs. So this on this particular slide, there's a table, and it's just a table that summarizes some of the differences. Some of the differences, such as height, type of Bodhi tree, duration spent in household life, duration performing austerities, and even the lifespan of the past 25 Buddhas. Now, there's more information that's available in the Buddhavamsa and commentary, but I haven't populated the table with all of it. But some observations from this particular collation of data. All the Buddhas are very tall in stature, some much more than others, particularly those measuring in Ratana cubits. So that is the measure in cubits of a measure of a hand. Measure of an elbow to the tip of a little finger. And this differs from Hatha cubits, which is a measure of a hand. So in the case of Gautama Buddha, he appears, according to this table, to be the shortest in height of the past 25 Buddhas, while Mangala Buddha appears to be the tallest of all the past Buddhas, the past 25 Buddhas. And then when we look at lifespan, the past Buddhas born in other eons is significantly longer. So in the Baddhakappa, this auspicious period, their lifespans are much shorter. And in particular, Gautama Buddha, again, is significantly shorter in lifespan to all the others. And again, with the exception of Gautama Buddha, it looks like past Buddhas spent on average about 10% of their lifespan in household life. And in the case of Gautama Buddha being the exception, he appears to have spent more than a third of his lifespan in household life. And then when we look at performing austerities, it can be as short as 7 days or as long as Gautama Buddha's case, which is 6 years. So it's quite interesting to just have a look and to see what it can be like for past Buddhas, and that these types of details are somewhat available to us. There's also in the commentary to the Buddhavamsa 30 things that apparently happen with all Buddhas, and in Pali this is Tinsa Buddha Dhammata. Now I don't know about the veracity of these things, but in some of the suttas, some of these things can be confirmed, but the complete 30, I'm not exactly sure, but it's in the commentary to the Buddhavamsa. So some of them we've already mentioned before when we've gone through the Bodhisattva's journey to becoming a future Buddha. But the interesting thing here is how these events occur for all Buddhas. So the one about being fully conscious at the moment of entering his mother's womb, that's for all Buddhas. Likewise, when he remains sitting cross-legged with his face turned outwards while he's in the mother's womb. Also, all mothers of Buddhas give birth standing in the standing posture. And the births all take place in forest groves. And immediately after birth, with his feet placed on a golden cloth while facing north, he takes those 7 steps and roars the lion roar. So that's for all Buddhas. He also makes a great renunciation after seeing 4 signs and following the birth of a son. And when he performs the austerities, it's for at least 7 days after going forth wearing the yellow robe. And on the day of his enlightenment, all Buddhas have a meal of milk rice. And it's while he's seated on a carpet of grass that he attains omniscience, so the knowledges, the Buddha jnanas. The 10th is in preparation for meditation, he uses the subject of in-breathing and out-breathing, so anapanasati. And all Buddhas defeat Mara's armies. So this one is, well, kind of obvious, but it's there as one of the 30 things. And the 12th is he attains to supreme perfection in all knowledge and virtue while seated under the Bodhi tree. So every Buddha does that, including all the special knowledges which are not shared with the others. And all Buddhas spend 7 days, 7 times 7 days in the vicinity of the Buddha. So if you've visited Bodh Gaya, you will notice all the different places where the Buddha spent a week. And there's 7 places around the Bodhi tree where he did so. So for all Buddhas, it's the same thing, that 7 times or 7 weeks of being in the vicinity of the Bodhi tree. And the request for him to preach the Dhamma comes from Mahabrahma. So for all Buddhas, it's the same. And the 15th is he preaches his first sermon, so setting the wheel in motion for the wheel of Dhamma in the deer park at Isipatana. And we'll come back to that one in the next slide as well. The 16th is he recites the Patimokkha to the fourfold assembly on the full day of Magha, so Magha Puja. So this is the same for all Buddhas. And he regularly resides in Jethavana. So that's also there. And he performs the twin miracle at the gate of the city of Savatthi. That's apparently the same for all Buddhas. And he preaches the Abhidhamma in the Tavatimsa. And the 20th is he descends from Tavatimsa, having preached the Dhamma there, to the gate of the city of Sankasa. The 21st is he frequently enters into the attainment of fruition. So this is Phala Samapatti. And he looks for people who are capable of instruction on 2 occasions. The 23rd is he lays down the precepts only when an occasion arises for them. The 24th is he recites the past birth stories, so the Jatikas, when suitable occasions occur to relate their meaning. And then the 25th is he recites the chronicle of the Buddhas, the Buddhavamsa, to an assembly of his kinsmen. The 26th is he gives kind reception to visiting monks. The 27th is he never leaves the place where he has spent the rains retreat without asking those who invited him or meeting with them. So all Buddhas are the same. And then 28th is each day he performs his duties before and after his meal and during the 3 watches of the night. So that's the same for all Buddhas. And on the day he attains final Nibbana, he eats a meal containing meat or flesh. So this is Mamsaraja Bhojana. So that's the same for all Buddhas. And then the very last one is after attaining 24,000,000 million attainments, he attains final extinguishment or Nibbana, Parinibbana. So that's quite a list. I'd recommend taking what is useful to you from that list. Now, we touched on this just before, but there are 4 places or locations that never change for all Buddhas. And sometimes people write in with these kinds of questions as well. And so it's interesting to be able to answer it. So apparently there are 4 places or locations that never change for all Buddhas. The first is that all Buddhas attain perfect enlightenment seated under the Bodhi tree. The second is all Buddhas preach the first sermon at the deer park at Isipatana. The third is that all Buddhas take their first steps on the ground at Sankasa when descending from Tavatimsa. And then the fourth is all Buddhas have the same location for their bed at Gandhakuti in Jethavana. So that's very interesting. It's interesting how it's that 4 and not others. And I don't have the answer to why or anything like that, but it's just very curious. Now we come to the marks of a great man. So we find this in Lakkhana Sutta, which is in the longer discourses, so Digha Nikaya discourse number 30, as well as repeated or referred to in Brahmayu Sutta, which is in the middle-length discourses, Majjhima Nikaya discourse number 91. So what it says is, a great man who possesses these 32 marks has only 2 possible destinies, no other. If he stays at home, he becomes a king, so that means household life, a wheel-turning monarch, a just and principled king. His dominion extends to all four sides. He achieves stability in the country, and he possesses the seven treasures. He has the following seven treasures: the wheel, the elephant, the horse, the jewel, the woman, the treasurer, and the counselor as the seventh treasure. He has over 1,000 sons who are valiant and heroic, crushing the armies of his enemies. After conquering this land girt by sea, he reigns by principle without rod or sword. But if he goes forth from the lay life to homelessness, he becomes a perfected one, a fully awakened Buddha who draws back the veil from the world. So if you remember from when we talked about Asunya Kappa, so a non-void period, that's a period where Buddhas, Pacceka Buddha, so Sammasan Buddhas, Pacceka Buddhas, and also these universal monarchs can come into the world. So a universal monarch is considered to be quite a purified kind of being, but of course not equal to the Buddha, but just interestingly having the similar 32 marks. Now, what are the 32 marks? The first is he has well-planted feet. And I know some of these are very contentious for some people, but I think it's good to just allow these things to come into the mind. There is no visual that we can get of someone who has these qualities, because at this time right now, it's not something that we can fathom, but just allow them to come into the mind as we go through them. The second is on the soles of his feet, there are 1,000-spoked wheels and rims and hubs, complete in every detail. So we heard that referred to when the Brahman Dona at the beginning of our session was fascinated, thinking, what kind of being is the Buddha? The third is he has projecting heels. The fourth is he has long fingers. The fifth, his hands and feet are tender. The sixth is his hands and feet cling gracefully. Seventh is his feet are arched. Eighth is his calves are like those of an antelope. Ninth is when standing upright and not bending over, the palms of both hands touch the knees. 10th is his private parts are retracted. 11th is he is golden colored, his skin has golden sheen. 12th is he has delicate skin, so delicate that dust and dirt don't stick to his body. 13th is his hairs grow one per paw. 14 is his hands stand up, they're blue black and curl clockwise. 15th is his body is as straight as Brahma's. 16th, he has bulging muscles in 7 places. 17th, his chest is like that of a lion. 18th, the gap between the shoulder blades is filled in. 19, he has the proportional circumference of a banyan tree. The span of his arms equals the height of his body. And 20, his torso is cylindrical. 21, he has an excellent sense of taste. 22, his jaw is like that of a lion. 23, he has 40 teeth. 24, his teeth are even. 25, his teeth have no gaps. 26, his teeth are perfectly white. 27, he has a large tongue. 28, he has the voice of a Brahma, like a cuckoo's call. 29, his eyes are deep blue. 30, he has eyelashes like a cow's. 31, between his eyebrows there are tufts. There grows a tuft, soft and white like cotton wool. And the 32nd is his head is shaped like a turban. The suttas go on to describe in more detail each of these marks and some of the causes and conditions, which is largely based on wholesome actions in past births, many past births, for these marks to arise. So we won't go into that now. However, even though these things are quite remarkable and some of them are also very difficult to comprehend, we do get a sense that the marks of a Buddha or that of a universal monarch are meant to be very unique and extraordinary. And when you consider the path to becoming a Buddha, and I assume there's also a path to becoming a universal monarch, just like there would be one to becoming Sakka, king of the Devas, and so on, or Mahabrahma, there is a certain amount of purity There's a certain amount of generosity. There's a certain amount of goodness in many lifetimes of cultivation. And so, in the case of the Buddha and his path as a bodhisattva, you know that he has fulfilled those 10 perfections in order to have these marks. Now, in the Parisa Sutta, this is Anguttara Nikaya chapter 8, discourse number 69. The Buddha reveals also his unique ability when approaching 8 different kinds of assemblies. So this includes an assembly of Khatyas, so the elite families, assembly of Brahmins, assembly of householders, assembly of ascetics, assembly of devas ruled by the 4 great kings, an assembly of the Tavatimsa devas, an assembly of Mara, and an assembly of Brahma. So the Buddha says to the bhikkhus, now I recall bhikkhus approaching an assembly consisting of many hundreds of all these different kinds of groups. I previously sat there, conversed and held discussions. I appeared just like them, and my voice became just like their voice. I instructed and encouraged, inspired and gladdened them with a Dhamma talk, and while I was speaking, they did not recognize me but thought, who is that is speaking, a deva or a human being? Having instructed and encouraged, inspired and gladdened them with a Dhamma talk, I disappeared. And when I disappeared, they did not recognize me, but thought, who is it that is speaking, a deva or a human being? So this statement I thought was also quite curious and interesting, because when the Buddha says he's able to appear just like them and make his voice just like his voice, we can kind of infer that there's some kind of physical appearance change, though they didn't recognize him, and also some kind of vocal change, which may also mean that he's able to speak in different languages as well as different voices. And in the Lakkhana Sutta, which we just went through, it says the Buddha, in regards to his voice, has a very persuasive voice. His words are persuasive to monks, to nuns, to laymen, to gods or devas, humans, demons, dragons, and even centaurs. And that's what he obtains as a Buddha. So I thought that was very remarkable as well. So I'm not going to read these out, but this is what is known as the Te Satati Jnana. So these are the Buddha's special knowledges. And this list can be found in the Patisambhida Magga, and otherwise known as the path of discrimination or the path of analytical discrimination. So these are the knowledges that the Buddhas and also their disciples gain in the attainment of both mundane and supramundane states. So knowledges of what is required for the development of this path to liberation, so vimukti, liberation, and also the clear understanding or insight or wisdom, this panya, that will result in liberation from any kind of attachment. So a Buddha perfects all 73 of these. And of these 73, 67 of these knowledges are shared by disciples. And the last 6 are not shared by the disciples. They're unique to perfectly enlightened Buddhas. And those are these last 6 right here at the bottom. So the ones that are not shared are the knowledge of the disposition of other spiritual faculties, the knowledge of the underlying tendency of beings. So these are the anusayas. Also the knowledge of the twin miracle, where he's able to twin himself. Also the knowledge of the attainment of great compassion. So the Buddha is the only one with the knowledge of Mahakaruna. So when we think about the karuna that we cultivate, even the karuna that we cultivate for the second pathway or the doorway to Nibbana, the karuna apamana, it's not even close to the Mahakaruna that the Buddha or the Buddhas cultivate as a perfection. And or not as a perfection, but as this great compassion. And the 5th one is the knowledge of omniscience. So it's only a Buddha because he has all these knowledges and other supernormal powers and things. And also knowledge of unobstructiveness. So I guess with this last one, it's about the idea of knowing what obstructs others. So he knows how to unobstruct as well. Then there's also the powers of a Tathagata. So this is also something different. This is Tathagata Bala. And this is referenced in regards to the Buddha's lion's roar. So you see this in the Mahasihanada Sutta. So this is Majjhima Nikaya discourse number 12, as well as Sihanada Sutta, which is in the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 10, discourse number 21. So he says in these suttas, these are the Tathagata's power that the Tathagata has, on account of which he claims the place of the chief bull, roars his lion's roar in the assemblies, and sets in motion the Brahma wheel. So if you're wondering why the graphic for today's live streams is of a lion, it's because of this. It's not meant in any way of disrespect or anything like that, but because of the Buddha, the Tathagata's lion's roar. And so he goes on to say the Tathagata understands as it really is the possible as possible and the impossible as impossible. The second is the Tathagata understands as it really is the result of undertaking karma past, future, and present in terms of possibilities and causes. So we know from the Achintaya Sutta that the fruit of karma, the results of karma, is in the domain of things that we can't conceive, but a Tathagata can. So that's one of his powers. And the first one is also associated with knowing about speculation about the world. A Buddha would have certain knowledges and powers regarding that, so would know what is possible and impossible is impossible. Then the third one is, again, the Tathagata understands as it really is the ways leading everywhere. I mean, this one is quite vast when you think the ways leading everywhere. What can that be? I can't even fathom to answer that one. I'd need to do more research on that one. The fourth is the Tathagata understands as it really is the world with its numerous and diverse elements. And we see this time and time again, even when we go to the Bahudukata, Bahudatu Sutta, that also goes into this too. And you see the brevity of the Tathagata's knowledge there. The fifth is, again, the Tathagata understands as it really is the diversity in the disposition of beings. So this is clearly one of these special knowledges. The sixth is, again, the Tathagata understands as it really is the superior and inferior condition of the faculties of other beings and persons. So again, this is one of those special knowledges that is not shared. The seventh is the Tathagata understands as it really is the defilement, the cleansing, and the emergence in regard to the jhanas, liberations, concentrations, and meditative attainments. The eighth is the eighth, ninth, and 10th are the Tevija. So I won't read them out, but it's recalling our past births and the divine eye and knowing the knowledge for the destruction of the taints. So on account of these 10 powers, the Tathagata claims the place of the chief bull, he roars his lion's roar in the assemblies and sets in motion the Brahma wheel. So when you examine the list of the 73 knowledges and also these 10 powers which they do intersect, you have to ask, how can anyone in this world really compare to a Buddha? For example, people in their ignorance, they assert that someone like the Greek philosopher Aristotle or a past religious figure, I'm not going to name any particular ones, but they say that they are equal or comparable to the Buddha, and some even say they are better than the Buddha. But from what we know about historical figures or philosophers or scientists or things like that, they only come into their knowledge in one birth. None of them have gone through the difficult process of becoming a Buddha over many lifetimes and many rebirths and to perfect certain perfections, nor do they possess any of these unique marks or special knowledges and powers. So it's something to really consider and something to consider in the light of if some of these things are blocking you, they are blocking you from the noble path, because particularly the one about the Buddha's enlightenment and how special and unique and important it is. because receiving teachings from a Buddha is a very rare and wonderful thing, and being able to understand them as well, to seek liberation using the Noble Path is something that is very precious. So in doing this particular session, it's really to help people to overcome any blocks in relation to the Tathagata, in relation to the Buddhas, with respect to any kind of ignorance or delusion, that there are other people in the world now and before that are equal to Buddhas. So I've also included in here the Achintaya Sutta that I mentioned before, and we've referenced it a number of times in relation to different topics on karma, on speculation about the world, and also about jhanas. So these are the 4 things that the Buddha says that one should try not to conceive because it will result in madness or frustration. So the one that we reference here is the domain of the Buddhas. So we are able to glean a little bit, to investigate, to examine certain aspects. But if we do so, we do so in order to gain some understanding of the perfection of a perfectly enlightened Buddha or Buddhas. But we also have to take care when delving into the domain of the Buddhas and not to insult them due to our ignorance or delusion, and not to assert certain things that may not be true. It's better not to do so because we could get it wrong. And we'll come to that in the next session about slandering the Buddha. So we need to know certain things about the Buddha and what he has taught, but not much more than that. Like some of what we've covered today, and then also about the Dhamma and everything, but not more that confuses, distorts, or misapprehends or harms others. So only a few more slides to go, and I've included some things just at the end of this particular part 1 on the Tathagata. And this one is the question of, can there be more than one Buddha at the same time? And this is a commonly asked question because people often wonder this. And the Buddha actually addresses this in a number of discourses. So for example, the Mahagovinda Sutta, this is Digha Nikaya discourse number 19. Sakka, king of the Devas of the Tavatimsa realm, he offers 8 genuine praises of the Buddha, and the Devas of the Tavatimsa realm were uplifted and overjoyed. Some of them actually thought, having been overjoyed, if only 4 fully awakened Buddhas might arise in the world and teach the Dhamma just like the Blessed One, that would be for the welfare and happiness of the people, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of gods and humans. And then some of the Devas thought, if only 3 fully awakened Buddhas or 2 fully awakened Buddhas, and the same thing. But when this was said, Sakka actually said, it is impossible, gentlemen, for 2 perfected ones, fully awakened Buddhas, to arise in the same solar system at the same time. And then he gives his good wishes to the Buddha, saying, may the Blessed One be healthy and well. May he remain with us for a long time. And that would be for the welfare and happiness of the people, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of devas and humans. Now, none of those suttas give reasons why. So there's about 3 suttas mentioned on the slide. But it also happens to be a question that King Milinda asked to Venerable Nagasena. So we can go to the questions of King Milinda. And Venerable Nagasena answers the question by saying, this world system, O king, is a one Buddha supporting world. That is, it can bear the virtue of only a single Tathagata. If a second Tathagata were to arise, the world could not bear him. It would shake and tremble. It would bend this way and that. It would disperse, scatter into pieces, dissolve, be utterly destroyed. Just as a boat, O king, might be able to carry one passenger across, then when one man had got on board, it would be well trimmed and able to bear his weight. But if a second man were to come to the first in age and caste and strength and size and stoutness of body and build of frame, and he too should get on board the boat, would that boat be able, O king, to carry them both? Certainly not, sir, says King Melinda. It would shake and tremble, it would bend this way and that, it would break into pieces, be shattered and dissolved, and utterly destroyed. It would sink into waves. So that is the answer. I'm not going to embellish on that anymore. That is quite a good answer. So let me see how many more slides. So only 3 more slides, and they're relatively short. This one really looks at the fact that all Buddhas fully awaken through the Four Noble Truths. So sometimes people ask, is the Four Noble Truths the same? Is it the same teaching that a Buddha gives from eon to eon when they teach the Buddha? And it says in the Arahanta Sutta that whatever arahants, perfectly enlightened ones in the past, in the future, at present, they have all fully awakened to things as they really are. All have fully awakened to the Four Noble Truths as they really are. So it's the same teaching. And then the second last one is this one about the dependent origination, the understanding of the dependent origination. And it's a similar thing. You find this in Buddhavagga of Samyutta Nikaya. And this refers to 7 Buddhas who are fully awakened by understanding dependent origination. And so, without reading all of that, essentially it just says that all Buddhas, including Vipassi Buddha, Sikhi Buddha, Vesabha Buddha, Kakusanda Buddha, Kona, Gamana Buddha, Kassapa Buddha, and of course our Gautama Buddha, they've all fully awakened by understanding Paticca Samuppada. So I'd like to close this session, this part 1, with some inspiring verses. So we go back to the Loka Sutta that we looked at the beginning of our session. And this is to arouse confidence and conviction in the Buddha. If anything, this session hopefully has aroused some saddha and also some panya, some wisdom and some right view towards the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. And so these verses are uttered by the Buddha in the Loka Sutta, and I'll just read them out. Having directly known all the world, all in the world just as it is, he is detached from all the world, disengaged from all the world. He is the vanquisher of all, the wise one who has untied all knots. He has reached the supreme peace, Nibbana, inaccessible to fear. He is the Buddha, his taints destroyed, untroubled, all doubts cut off. Having reached the destruction of all karma, he is liberated in the extinction of acquisitions. He is the Blessed One, the Buddha. He is the Lion, unsurpassed. In this world with its devas, he set in motion the wheel of Brahma. Thus those devas and human beings who have gone for refuge to the Buddha assemble and pay homage to him, the Great One, free from diffidence, tamed. He is the best of tamers. Peaceful, he is the seer among peace bringers. Freed, he is the chief of liberators. Crossed over, he is the best of guides across. Thus indeed they pay homage to him, the Great One, free from diffidence. In this world, together with its devas, there is no one who can rival you. So we've now come to the end of our session. So this is part 1 of the Tathagata, and it's wonderful to spend this Vesak with the Buddha's words. So as we've clarified our understanding, or some of our understanding, of the perfection of a fully enlightened Buddha or Sammasambuddha, hopefully this has aroused some conviction towards the Tathagata and dispelled any wrong views or obstructions. So let's now express in our minds our gratitude to the Buddhas for their great compassion and wisdom. Let's also express our gratitude to our other teachers, parents, and good friends who encourage us on the Noble Eightfold Path. And I would also like to express gratitude and Bohomaping Anumodana, much merit, to the Kalyanamittras who helped with contributions of research towards today's Part 1 and Part 2 Dhammadana. May this Dhamma offering assist the path. And if you would like to dedicate merit from joining this Dhamma session to any departed relatives, you can do so now. And we can share the merits of our wholesome time together with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem to all of you. Wishing you well. May you continue to find happiness in the Buddha's teachings, develop on the Noble Eightfold Path, and grow in wholesome quality. We'll continue with part 2 in about almost 3 hours, something like that. Teruan Saranai, blessings of the Triple Gem.